All right. Here we go. You guys ready for tonight?
Yep.
I made it in on two wheels just at the end there. It's hard on a nice night like this. Okay. So, this week we're going to be looking at Holy Week as we keep going through this chronological life of Christ. We spent many years traveling with Jesus from creation to birth, through adolescence, and now through the most powerful 3 years of ministry that the history of the world has ever experienced. We read about miracles, impactful teachings, powerful moments, and only a few weeks out now from the end of this class together. So we're here wrapping up. I think we have April 1st is going to be our last class. Thank you, Terry, for reminding me to share that this week. So as we begin this Holy Week tonight, we're going to look at kind of the first part of Holy Week. Do what? I am chewing gum. I forgot to spit it out. Oh, somebody's tattling on me online. No one likes a tattletale online, people. So we're going to look at the first few days of Holy Week is where we're going to jump in. I tried to get all the way until Passover, but I couldn't quite make it all the way to the arrest. So, and I didn't want to rush too far. So we're going to start with Sunday. Now, I had some handouts. If you guys don't have one, my mom has some here. I didn't realize how tiny the print was on it until I just handed them out. So sorry about that. But it kind of gives you a day-by-day breakdown. I just found that online and grabbed it. I didn't create that. But kind of what happens each day of Holy Week, starting with Sunday being the triumphal entry. So as Jesus and the apostles begin their short journey from Lazarus' house in Bethany, if you remember when we left, they had just had a meal at Lazarus' house with Mary and Martha, and Mary had kind of anointed him with perfume. So they rest that night on either Friday night or Saturday night, we're not sure, but on Sunday, we know that they leave Lazarus' house in Bethany, and he sends two apostles ahead to a neighboring town to acquire a donkey so he can ride into Jerusalem on the donkey. This fulfills a prophecy that is found in Zechariah. As they near the Mount of Olives, if you guys have your maps, you can look at them. If not, I know we looked at it last week, but it's about a 2-mile difference over the Mount of Olives between Bethany and Jerusalem, Bethany being to the east, Jerusalem to the west. As they go over the Mount of Olives, after they crest the top of the hill, the crowds start to show up, and they begin waving palm branches, spreading them on the ground along with their cloaks and singing praises of Jesus because all that they have seen. If you remember last week, we talked about a large portion of this crowd would have been the people who were with him on that last journey through Perea, on that last journey from up in that border between Galilee and Samaria as they traveled south. And then he split off to Bethany and they went into Jerusalem. So they were expecting him to come in on Sunday. And there they are waiting for them, waiting for him and for the apostles, and get excited. And they've seen not only the miracles over those last few months, but also there would be some in that crowd who were in Jerusalem for the Passover festival anyway, who had seen part of his ministry over the last 3 years. You know, we had talked about a lot of the crowd growing and some crowd getting mad and kind of this division. Well, everybody that's been a fan of Jesus and has remained a disciple over the last 3 years is there. And they're ushering in their king, and they're very excited. Traveling on his final journey. So the apostles are clueless about why there's such a big uproar with this magnificent welcome. But the Pharisees are all too aware of the potential consequences from such a showing. They're worried about the rabble-rousing, as they call it, and the hubbub that is being created by Jesus as he enters into Jerusalem. And they ask Jesus to disperse the crowds. They say, surely you see this is too much. Surely you see the ruckus that you're causing and the distraction that this is during the Passover. Jesus refuses, and he further solidifies their stance that the time is becoming of the essence to murder him. He says something along the lines, if the rocks themselves could sing, they would. Like, there's nothing that I can do to silence this crowd. Even all of creation welcomes the moments that are to come. As the parade enters the city gates, Jesus takes a moment and he mourns for the future of Jerusalem and the lostness with which they will be entombed in the coming years, yearning that they would just have recognized the time of God's coming to them. He takes a moment of reflection knowing that not everyone will turn, not everyone will be saved, and how painful that is. As parents, I think we know what that's like if we have a child who starts to go astray, or a child who maybe is lost for a season. It's a pain in his heart to know that all of Jerusalem will not accept him, much less all of the world. Once inside, the people of Jerusalem begin to ask the ones who aren't part of this crowd what is going on, because there's such a spectacle unfolding before them like they have never seen. His followers tell him that Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth, has arrived. He's then ushered into the temple, where he performs many healings among the crowd, and the children are heard celebrating in the temple area with Hosanna to the Son of David. The Pharisees again ask Jesus to put a stop to what they consider blasphemy, but Jesus just reiterates that they of all people should be the ones recognizing the fulfillment of the prophecies in front of their eyes. After a day of being adored, supported, and performing miraculous powers, Jesus takes the 12 and they head back to Bethany to sleep for the night. They will need their rest because the next day is going to be very busy. So they have this moment ushered in. The Pharisees don't enjoy what's going on. They're concerned about the crowds. They're concerned about the distraction from Passover. And Jesus has a positive day. No rebuking, no talking down to people, no hard teachings, healings, joy, celebration, the triumphal entry. They go back over the Mount of Olives to Bethany. And the second day begins, which is, do I have Monday? I do, Monday. The highlight of Monday will be the second cleansing, but before they get there, as they leave Bethany to return to Jerusalem, Jesus investigates a fig tree. When he sees that it is not producing fruit like it should, he curses the fig tree and it withers. Jesus has no use for trees that appear healthy but are not producing fruit. I think you guys are all smart enough to understand that parable, to understand what's going on. It's not a parable, actually. It happens in real life. You're all smart enough to figure out the implications of this action on those who call themselves Christians but are not bearing fruit for the kingdom. This will be a powerful image, and the fig tree will come back again because the disciples will pass this fig tree every day as they go back to Bethany, back to Jerusalem, back to Bethany, back to Jerusalem. They'll see this fig tree and what Jesus has done. From here, Jesus marches straight into the temple, into Jerusalem. They crest over the hill, and they enter in through a city gate the connection is itself the temple. And he enters in the temple, and he clears the place for the second time in his ministry. If you remember, we saw 3 years earlier, he had done this as the beginning of his ministry in Judea. He cleared the temple. And again, he does it now on Monday of Holy Week. He turns over the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. He does not allow anyone to carry merchandise and chastises the actions of the crowd. The Pharisees are watching this all unfold, and we're told that they begin to look for a way to kill him, for they feared him and his popularity among the crowd. Remember, the clearing of the temple would be a threat to the religious institution, but a breath of fresh air to the general population who has suffered under this oppressive system. So again, we get that idea of the establishment being very concerned and realizing that they need to do something and do something now because things are getting out of hand. But the people who are freed from the clearing are celebrating him all the more. After the second cleansing, some Greeks ask to see Jesus. They are most likely converts or proselytes, and they want to meet this man who is causing such a ruckus in their new faith. This may have been their first time at a Passover. Maybe they've gone a couple times, but they're kind of interested. And what's interesting about this is it's kind of that first time we see not just a healing for somebody who was Gentile, but for somebody, for a Gentile population who's converted to want to learn more about Jesus, to seek him out. Jesus responds with a discourse on not only it being his time to die, but the cost of discipleship again. As the Greeks are not Hebrew, this is a rare time that we see Jesus explaining the cost as it would apply to Gentiles as well. So we see a kind of inclusion, a more full inclusion than just a Gentile being utilized in a miracle or to hear a teaching, but a full understanding of even you as a Gentile will have to make sacrifices. This is not just going to be something that's easy because you're not favored more than the Jews were, even though some of them rejected. Jesus concludes his discourse with a simple appeal that his heart is troubled, and he wishes he could ask God for another way. Yet his death was the reason for why he was sent, and that the Father's name should be glorified. And then this is interesting. God audibly replies, I have glorified it and will glorify it again. So Jesus asks, it's kind of a pre-Garden of Gethsemane moment. Like, God, I wish there was a different way. I wish we could continue ministry. I wish I could keep going. I wish there was something besides what's set before me. Yet, this is why I was sent. And I was sent that your name would be glorified. And God audibly replies, I've glorified it and will glorify it again. And the crowd hears this. Jesus proclaims this voice was for their benefit and not his own, that he must die, and that while they have the light a little longer, they should put his trust in him so that darkness will not overtake them. For Jesus did not come to judge the world but save it, yet the Father will judge all those who reject him. And Jesus leaves, and he heads back to the Mount of Olives. So we see even in these final days, Jesus is still pleading with people, please listen, please hear, please understand. You will only have me for a little longer, so utilize the time you have. It says he heads back to the Mount of Olives, is how we read it in Scripture. Theoretically, they could have camped on the Mount of Olives. If you think about the time of year, it would have been. But we see the next morning that they again passed the fig tree that's planted near the road at Bethany. So we assume, we have a possibility that they do return to Bethany each evening this week. When they go back to Bethany, they stay with Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, and then head back to Jerusalem each morning. And that's going to lead to the first question for you guys. So knowing how this week will end, Jesus seeks the comfort of his dear friends each evening. Each day, he has work to do. Each day, whether it's a good day like Sunday or a rough day like Monday, each day he knows that there's serious ministry, and he knows what's coming at the end of the week. He knows what he's going to have to face. He knows the struggle. And so in these moments, he continues to return back to the home of his dear friends. He could have stayed in Jerusalem. He could have stayed among the crowds. He could have stayed anywhere that he would have liked at that time, and yet he returns back to Lazarus and Mary and Martha each evening. So my question for you guys to share is, when life is tough, who do you turn to for comfort? And Jesus doesn't count as the answer. That's not the question I'm looking for tonight. That's the right answer. But the question for discussion is, who on earth, another human being, do you turn to for comfort?
Say it again. It's not a human being. There was one time when I was really in bad shape, but I turned to Pastor Luke. corresponded by mail, you put a stamp on it. This is like 1969.
I know, I still
Yeah,
send
so,
envelopes
yeah.
myself.
And so, and then occasionally we had a phone call. And then when I moved back, I stayed with my aunt for a short period of time. I had come off of his oldest sister's wedding. And ended up staying after high school. And then he was going to pharmacy school. And when I moved to the St. Louis area, I got an apartment. And so he was my roommate while I was going to school. And then we both got married a month apart. But we've been really close. I mean, from and he's a good Christian, and we do have a lot of discussions. Usually try to get out with him.
To your work people about work stuff, or do you speak
3 or 4 times a year.
family people about family?
Huh?
Used to be every other week.
Well, yeah, before.
How about you, Chuck?
You know, at a young age, I determined that as a young father and husband, that I would be the problem solver. And I don't know that I go to anybody. I go to God. But my brother. But I don't really go to people.
When I was younger, my dad was still alive, I'd talk to him, but he'd always give me an answer every time.
Yeah, I get that too.
You know?
I love my dad, but we would butt heads.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
They didn't.
Later, even later in life, I'd say why you wanna do that?
Yeah, he was Depression era, World War II era, it's like,
But you respect it.
oh, I did, oh, absolutely, yeah, don't get me wrong, I just sometimes felt that he didn't show any emotions.
A lot of men don't show their emotions on it.
Shut up.
Or unlike
Well, nice.
Those folks didn't have easy lives.
Friends, I mean, I talked to her.
Spend that, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna do whatever.
That was my dad.
When my mom and dad moved into assisted living, my brother and I packed up and sold the house. And in one of the kitchen drawers, my mom had aluminum foil that she had folded up.
All of that.
Reusing aluminum
Oh,
foil.
yeah, that goes back, oh, yeah.
They grew up in depression.
Yes, you are.
You didn't, you reused that.
That's what she grew up.
Who was it? Someone said that their friends.
Yeah, and I know when I said it, it's like, I'm not even getting so much.
Really? Really?
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't do that too. Almost.
It's not because, it's just because that's how you used to be doing it.
We grew up here in Denver, so.
You didn't have paper towels until like the late 60s.
I don't even remember ever having paper towels.
Probably not.
Not as a kid.
Yeah, Tupperware was blue bonnet margarine tub.
Yeah.
Yeah. My
Absolutely.
sister still does that now, their sister. I mean, it's not blue bonnet, but it's definitely margarine.
And you know what? Butter. Oh, yeah, affording. I get that. But, yeah, butter's actually healthier for you than
I wonder why it was so
margarine.
much more money.
All right. So we've done the triumphal entry. We talked about the second clearing of the temple on Monday, Sunday and Monday. Then we get to Tuesday. That's still the days of the week as I remember them. As they set out for Jerusalem, chronological days of the week. As they set out for Jerusalem again, Peter notices the fig tree and points it out to Jesus. And Jesus' response to him is, have faith in God, and that if they remain without doubt, even they could perform such miracles over creation, and even cast mountains into the sea. Each morning, Jesus' first stop in Jerusalem is in the temple courts to teach. And after 2 days of gaining support and admiration, the Pharisees are looking for ways to win back the support of the crowds. So I think each day that Jesus goes back, the Pharisees also have some time away from Jesus, and either utilize that time to continue plotting his death, or in this case, it sounds like perhaps on Monday night, they started thinking of, how can we trip him up so people will stop believing him? How can we get the crowds back and kind of bring order? And the way they do this, they decide their approach is to face Jesus directly and ask him by what authority he teaches and heals. They question him. They question his authority. Knowing their intent, Jesus responds with an offer to provide an answer, if they will answer his question. I love how Jesus works. He says, was John's baptism from heaven or men? Talking of John the Baptist. Because again, remember, the crowds, at this point, John the Baptist is a martyr. It's really hard to defame a martyr. At this point, everyone in the crowd believes John the Baptist was a prophet and a man of God. And so to have the religious leaders say, well, his baptism wasn't really from God, would really make them mad. However, if they say he was from God, then that means all the things John the Baptist said must have been true, and therefore Jesus must be the Messiah. And they have a little powwow off to the side to figure out how are they going to answer Jesus, because there's no answer that's going to land in their favor. And I just think of this vision in my mind of what this must have looked like. These guys in the long robes and the tall hats all gathered over in a corner, mumbling to each other and finally trying to figure out an answer of how they can do this while Jesus just sits there and waits. And the crowd sit there and wait, and they turn around and they have an answer. And their answer is, we don't know. They say, we don't know, to which Jesus responds, then neither will I tell you by what authority I use to teach and heal. He traps them up in their own attempt to trap him. And then he takes this opportunity to present 3 parables to the Pharisees, to reveal their actions in front of the audience. Remember, everybody's watching this. Everything's on display in the temple courts. And so he tells these parables to the Pharisees, to the religious leaders, but everyone can hear. And the first one he tells is about 2 sons. And the dad tells the first son to go work in the vineyard. The son says, no, I won't. But then he goes. The second son says, yeah, I'll go, but never goes. And Jesus asked them, which one did the will of the Father? Which one did the will of the Father? The one who said no and then went, or the one who said yes and then never went? The answer to that one was the son that says no and then goes, because eventually, even though he fights it at first, he does do the will of the Father. However, the ones who are saying like, yeah, we're doing it, we'll take care of it, the Pharisees, but they aren't doing it, are not following the will of the Father. The second one's a little more obvious. It's a vineyard owner sends his servants to go check in on the workers, and they kill the servants. And so then the vineyard owner sends the son, because surely they won't kill the son, and they murder the son, thinking we'll get the inheritance if the son is dead. And he asks them, how will the Father respond? Now in this parable, the servants killed represent the prophets, and the son represents Jesus. And how will the Father respond? Well, pretty angrily. Pretty angrily. Then the third parable he tells is of a wedding banquet, and this sounds similar to another wedding banquet parable that was talked about before. The meal is prepared. Those who invited do not attend. In this one, they actually attack the servants. He sends out for people in the streets to attend. But here's what this parable changes. There's one who comes to the wedding, but not in wedding clothes. And so he is turned out. One of the ones that Jesus said, go invite people in the streets. And they show up. But one of them doesn't show up in wedding clothes, and he's turned out. And he says, many are invited, but few are chosen. And the parable in this is more for us than for the Pharisees. But in this one, it's if you're going to respond to the call of going to the wedding, you have to do so fully. You have to do so fully. You have to be fully committed. You have to be all in. If you say you're going to go to the wedding, even though you weren't invited, you have to dress for a wedding. If you're going to become a Christian, even though we don't deserve the gift of grace, we have to behave and act and live as Christians would, not just rest and cheapen that grace. Now, the influential and religious leaders realize he's talking about them in these parables, and so they seek to trap him in his own words. They ask him a series of questions that they will use as evidence against him with the authorities. So the first question's asked by the Herodians, and the Herodians would have been Jewish believers, Jewish people of power, of means, that were kind of okay with the Roman government. Like, okay, we're all right. Like, you're letting us do our thing. It's kind of a placating. Like, as long as you aren't stepping on my rights, then I'm okay with however you want to treat us. The Herodians ask him, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? Obviously, that would have been a huge problem if Jesus had said, don't pay taxes. That would have been cause for arrest. But that isn't what he says. He takes the coin and whose picture's on, and he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. So then the Sadducees ask him a question. This one won't get him in trouble with authorities, but it should trip him up in their minds. They ask about a woman whose husband has died and has not had children. The custom is that the next brother is to marry her and have children, but suppose the childless trend continues for 7 brothers. So she marries the first brother, no kids, he dies. The second brother, no kid. 1 bride, 7 brothers. It's not quite the name of the musical. But that's what this parable's about. The Sadducees who believe in the resurrection want to know, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Jesus' response is, in the resurrection, marriages and weddings will no longer exist. And those who are resurrected will live forever. Those who resurrect. And so he keeps answering them. They think they have him trapped because they're trying to get him to answer questions inside a box that doesn't exist in the kingdom, a box that pales in comparison to what Christ has to offer us and what God has prepared for us. The third one is the Pharisees, and they ask him, which commandment is the greatest? Again, if you can pick one, and you can say, well, he said this, but what about all the other commandments? Then they can cause a stirring in the crowd. But you guys know the answer to this one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then Jesus does what Jesus is allowed to do. He adds a second, is to love your neighbor as yourself. For all the prophets and the law rest on these 2 commandments. Realizing that his answers have stumped them, realizing that he has gotten the better of these people trying to trick him at this Tuesday morning trip-up event, Jesus takes his turn. He's kind of silenced them at this point. They realize no matter what question we come up with, he's going to come up with an answer we weren't prepared for. I think that's something they tell lawyers. Like, don't ever ask a question if you don't already know the answer. Like, they're starting to realize we're never going to trap him in words. So Jesus takes his turn to stump them. And he asks them, whose son is the Christ? From whose son will the lineage of the Messiah arrive? They respond that he will be the son of David, going back again into what they expect from Old Testament. And Jesus asked him, how then can David call his own son the Lord? And this perplexes their minds. It begins to unravel their theological beliefs to the point that the Bible says no one dared to ask him any more questions. And this isn't we do see that Jesus coming through the lineage of David is prophecy fulfillment, but that his real father is God. And what he's showing in this moment is they're expecting a human, 100% human Messiah from the birth line of David. And Jesus is saying no one would ever call one of their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids, Lord. Not a father wouldn't do that with a son. A son wouldn't hold over a son. And so they get tripped up by this fact that maybe Jesus is God's son. And it says no one dared to ask him any more questions. When you can ask a really good question, when you can make people stop and think and pause, you know it's a good question if after you ask it, they sit there and they go, I don't know about that one. I need to think about that. Few things are as powerful as a good question. That's why Jesus asks so many, but directly answers so few. To illustrate this for tonight, for this next question, I want to take a little extended discussion time so each person can answer this. So there's a question you got to think about before you answer, and then it kind of reveals kind of the power of questions as you really contemplate them. If you knew it would not fail, what would you do for the glory of God and the growth of his kingdom? Take some time and think about it.
You would what?
Financial policy.
Oh,
People that are considering themselves Christian make budgets and stuff like 10%, whatever they earn, 10% is going to the church. And then if somebody is left, they will have to be reading their and give back again to the find your and other stuff. You have only that much, the rest you can. And you will so financially set in your with a strong foundation that you can start adding those to because you have saved some money because you are not dependent to anyone else. And at that point, when you know that because you are paying those 10%, it's always there inside it changes the way you want financially. And it's every Christian, and if we know, as we know, it will not fail, and every Christian would start going like that, we would act so differently. That we would be
you got your help. Again, being human, you know, the failure rate's pretty high. Yeah, yeah. Well, and again,
coming to it, going this is on my challenge.
sure.
I am training everything in my life. So
You know what? You could.
I really living way below my means. And that is not.
But there's also been evangelism the scale. Where it wouldn't fail.
Yeah,
We've had so many failures in our lives, you know, that,
you wouldn't wanna,
I don't
you
even
wouldn't
know.
wanna put yourself out there.
Well, the fear of failure is why we don't do 99% of what we want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
They would like have to come to it and say it to the people who have really good answers. I don't have that skill set.
I don't have an answer.
So that's what I think.
I like your answer, Will.
They'll just
Yes,
take
I
it.
do.
Take it and run with it. That's a group answer.
Yeah, 'cause it wouldn't fail,
If it wouldn't
doing
fail, I
everything
wouldn't worry about money. I wouldn't worry about relationships. I wouldn't worry about the price of gas. I just go.
There are people like that.
Oh, yeah.
And you know it's not gonna
That's
fail.
true.
And you know it's not going to fail, so
So you're gonna
I'm
be
just
able
going
to
to
spread the
go.
word
John,
out there.
that was kind of what John Wesley did, because every time he got an increase, he wouldn't take it, he would give it away, and
Right.
what came to money. I think for me, if I knew it would not fail, I would try to get my grandkids back. I think that's where there's lean.
Tomorrow Tara's gonna go blind.
Well, that would get your grandkids together back in the church.
The other thing is,
When you said I'd like to,
part
do they
of
have it here?
doing for the glory of God, there could be a lot of different things. Thinking of Michelangelo, you know, things like that. Well, we did that for the glory of God, you know.
Right.
Obviously, it wasn't a failure. I mean, it's still there, you know.
Anything can be turned to God's glory.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not anything, but
Well,
most
no,
things.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Christian college, 12, 15 years.
I don't have a good answer.
Those students there, they were required to
Be,
check.
wouldn't fail, all the children would
Okay, and it was
grow
over
up
here.
knowing Jesus,
Had adopted
you know, in their younger lives.
children.
And then when they got older, they would decide their own fate. But there's a lot of people that don't even know anything.
Oh, is that right?
And that would help.
It's getting to the point with communications, the way it
Yeah, I didn't
is.
even know that.
It's really difficult for
I'm sorry,
people
we're
not to,
moving
at least experience a little bit of it, you know.
And I
And
don't.
ultimately, is once everyone hears
So I'm
the
sorry, I
word,
was being distracted. I was being distracted.
you know, which, the Bible now is on the internet and everything, you know, so they don't actually need, I mean, just with communications, I don't know. It's a tough question.
But if they walk away and they don't pursue it, and they don't want to listen, then so be it. But fair game. We knew it would not fail. Yeah.
Things that you were too proud to
That's what I said.
do.
Yes.
We've all experienced so much failure in so many different ways. It's hard to imagine.
I'm sorry. You must have lost your phone. Do it. Okay.
Okay, that was the devil's advocate thing.
Yes.
Residency in Branson or something.
Well, you could work, on my stuff, you know?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Go to the kingdom would be definitely,
All right. So I hope you guys all had a chance to answer. And if you didn't, or maybe your answer was, I don't know. Right? Like, that's okay. That's okay, right? The Pharisees couldn't figure it out either. That doesn't put you in good company, but it does mean you only had, like 8 minutes to answer a tough question. But it does show the power of a good question. It should make you think and contemplate. And Jesus was excellent at that. I stole this question from a book that I'm reading called The Art of Asking Better Questions. And this was one of them, and that has a whole list of them. But I just thought it'd be really intriguing to see what you guys come up with of how you think if you couldn't fail. Because I kept hearing that over and over again. Somebody'd say something like, Oh, but if I couldn't fail, that changes the answer, right? It kind of opens up to a lot of opportunities if there's guaranteed success. Life doesn't give us that, though, so get over it, I guess. Finishing on Tuesday. So Tuesday continues. Tuesday's a big day. Tuesday, we go from these parables and questions and the leaders trying to trip them up and kind of this back and forth battle. And then Jesus pivots a little bit and he goes into a series of woes. The narrative leaves from the leader's perspective, and Jesus takes over the teaching at this point. He addresses the crowd that's gathered, and he says that while the religious leaders do sit in the seat of Moses, they need to be careful not to do as the leaders do, for they are hypocrites, and they enjoy the adoration of people, oppress the poor, and show off their fancy robes. Then he begins to deliver this series of woes, is what it's called. Woes to the teachers of law and the Pharisees. You shut the kingdom of heaven in the faces of men, yet you yourselves will not enter. He says, woe to the teachers of law and Pharisees. You travel far and wide for a convert, and then burden them so they are twice as condemned as they were before. Woe to you, blind guides. You dismiss oaths made on the temple or the altar, but you hold the oaths of gold and sacrifice as obligation. He asked them, is it the sacrifice that is holy or the altar that makes it holy? Is it the gold that is sacred or the temple where it is donated that makes it sacred? Woe to you, teachers of law and Pharisees. You tithe even the smallest of your garden, which you should, but you neglect justice. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees. You are clean on the outside, but your insides are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees. You are like a tomb, whitewashed on the outside, but full of dead bones on the inside, unclean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees. You condemn your forefathers for murdering the prophets, and yet you snakes and brood of vipers will continue this practice this very week. He then leaves the temple courts, and he's walking through the court of the women, which is kind of an outer court. He stops to highlight their oppressive corruption by using the widow's mite as an example. From here, he leaves the temple. And he leaves Jerusalem, and he sits down on the Mount of Olives just across from the temple so he can still see it. And he delivers the Olivet Discourse, is what it's called. Now, the Olivet Discourse is, there's some discussion around this. So I'm going to explain it in a minute, but you're going to see a lot of discussion of destruction, of signs of the times, signs of end times. There's a couple different theological beliefs on which parts is he talking about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and which parts is he talking about the end of the world. And so as I'm going to go through it, this is one interpretation of it. But some aspects talk about are obviously the destruction of the temple, and others are obviously end times. But in the middle, there's kind of this transition where where his teachings could really go either way. So it is open to interpretation and discussion. But the big picture is he's talking about the end of an era, the end of an age, either way. So the apostles are pointing out while they sit on this Mount of Olives looking at the large buildings of the temple. The apostles point out how magnificent the buildings are, and Jesus warns them that the destruction of the temple is imminent. This would be a prophecy of 70 AD. And that's how I'm going to break these apart, is at the end of each one, tell you which one we kind of think they fall into. The destruction of the temple, then not one stone will stand upon itself, 70 AD. Peter, James, John, and Andrew draw nearer to Jesus, so just the 5 of them at this point. And they ask him how they will know he is returning, and what will the signs be as this event draws near. Jesus responds that there will be false prophets and deceivers, wars and earthquakes, famines and pestilence, and other fearful events that will happen in various places. But these are just the beginning of the birthing pains, not the end itself. We think he's talking at this point about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, because a lot of things happen between the Olivet Discourse, and when the temple is destroyed. The Romans come in 70 AD, and they attack, and they're the ones who tear apart the temple. And so we think that all of these things are prophesying towards that temple destruction. He then warns that before any of this will occur, they specifically will be persecuted for their faith, these 4 men. While this persecution will strengthen their witness, it will also be their demise. Yet a hair on their head will not perish, for their faith will have endured. Again, we're thinking 70 AD. These 4 men will be persecuted after Jesus dies. They will be hunted down. Following their persecution, there will be an increase in wickedness, and love will grow cold among the people. But he who stands firm at the end will be saved, and the gospel will be preached to all nations. We still think that this is kind of a reference to the end time, that after these guys, while these guys are being persecuted, that there's going to be an increase. Things are going to get worse and worse in Jerusalem. Eventually, that's why the Romans come back in. There's too much unrest, and that's why the Romans come in and disperse them. It says, there will be standing in the holy place an abomination of desolation, and those in Judea should flee to the mountains. This is the time of punishment. This is one that some people are saying they're looking for as a sign that the end times are coming in the future. The understanding of, as I was reading it, and we looked through, of course, the book that I'm utilizing for this, is still placing this as 70 AD. There were several abominations of desolation that had occurred previously as other nations came in and essentially would either offer inappropriate sacrifices, tear down Solomon's temple, would walk into the Holy of Holies. So we're thinking this abomination of desolation is the Roman government coming in to the temple and tearing it apart. This is a time of punishment. Great distress in the land and wrath against the people. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles and will be dreadful for pregnant women and nursing mothers. They should pray that this would not occur during winter months or on the Sabbath, for its distress will be unequaled. Again, we're going for 70 AD on this one, as the Romans are coming in. The Gentiles are trampling on Jerusalem through the temple. People begin fleeing, and we read in other historical documents that this is what happened, that the people living in Jerusalem started fleeing to the mountains. And here's where we start to get in more of a gray area. At this time, people will say that Jesus has returned and that others should rush to go find him. But do not be deceived, for his return will not be a secret, but rather an event that cannot be ignored. So, during the destruction in 70, people are saying, this is it, Jesus is coming back. I think I saw him. I heard that he might be out there. We should all run out to the wilderness. Jesus is there. But Jesus is saying, don't be deceived. It won't be a secret when I come back. Well, that's the end times. So now we're getting kind of a parallel, 2 things at once. There will be a distress in the heavens and on earth. There will be anguish. Angels will be sent with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather those who are saved. Again, you're kind of getting, well, a little bit. There's going to be distress in the heavens, and there will be anguish as the temple is destroyed. But the angels coming back with the loud trumpets, that's end times discussion. Like the fig tree shows signs that the summer is coming, when you see all these things happening, you will know that the time is coming. While heaven and earth as we know it will one day pass away, the words of Jesus will never pass. And here we get, again, kind of a duality of speaking both that you can see the signs that I've talked about, that the temple will be destroyed and that Jerusalem will be inhabited, but also the end times. No one knows when the time will occur, and there will be rapture-like events, so keep guard. Now we're moving straight to end times. Now we're done talking about the temple destruction. And like I said, some of these are up for debate, and you can read into other ones, but now we're moving on to no one knows when the end of the world will come. There will be rapture-like events, so keep guard. Then he launches into 4 parables to prepare them about keeping guard for the end times. Like a thief in the night, Jesus will come back unexpectedly. And I found these next 2 interesting. Like a faithful servant, continue persevering, even when it feels like he will never return. So this parable about a faithful servant continuing to persevere, even when it feels like he will never return, teaches us that Jesus will come back probably later than you expect. But keep persevering. Keep persevering. Even if it feels like it's never going to happen, he will come back, but it might be later than you expect. But then the next parable is about a wise woman who's fallen asleep while waiting on the bridegroom. It's actually the parable of the 10 virgins, but remained prepared for his arrival. So she's fallen asleep, we fall asleep, thinking that Jesus won't return, but we're kind of ready for him in case he shows up, which is good because Jesus will also come back sooner than you expect. Only Jesus can tell you that and be like, okay. I'll be later than you expect me, but I'll also come before you expect me. You don't know when I'm coming is the point, right? He'll come back later. It's kind of one of those things like we're waiting, and we want it so bad. And then whenever it happens, we're like, oh my gosh, here it is. I can't believe it's here. Like, even though he's told us. Like servants entrusted with wealth, this is the talents, the parable of the talents. Regardless of when Jesus returned, the fact remains that he will return, and he will reward those who have been good stewards. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, there will be judgment between the sheep and the goats. The sheep will be easily identified because during the time on earth, they cared for the dejected, the rejected, and the oppressed. These are end times that we're talking about here. When he comes back, there will be a judgment. And the sheep will be easily identified because while on earth, they cared for the dejected, the rejected, and the oppressed. This is one of those, you took care of the least of them, and so you took care of me. That's how you'll know the sheep from the goats. Jesus concludes the Olivet Discourse, and we are given insight to movements of Caiaphas and his courts. The scripture kind of tell us that Caiaphas gathers his group, and they start to devise their plan to quietly arrest Jesus and kill him, but not during the Passover feast, for they feared a riot. They finally come to the conclusion that he needs to be stopped, but we're not going to catch him in the courts. We're not going to get the crowds to turn the way that we thought we were, and so we need to do this quietly. We need to go get him when least expected. Otherwise, people may fight. People may fight for him. And that ends Tuesday. Now, Wednesday is preparation for deception. So after the Olivet Discourse, it's likely that Jesus and the apostles return to Bethany to rest at Lazarus' home again. Wednesday arrives, and we aren't given any indication as to what Jesus did on Wednesday, what he said or taught, or what any of the other apostles did either, except for Judas. While the others look to be taking a day of rest, especially as Jesus knew all that the next 4 days would entail. I mean, we're really getting down to the wire here. Judas uses this time to sneak away from the group and visit the chief priests and the temple guard. He works with them to create a plan for him to betray Jesus, and the price they pay for this act will be 30 pieces of silver, or, if you go back to the Levitical law in Exodus 21, the price of a slave. So, we have 5 minutes to answer this last question. Do you find Jesus' discourse of how and when he will return comforting or troubling? Or both? Or I don't know.
I just don't think we need to dwell on it. I think we just need to accept that he's coming again and be prepared.
I learned in one of these classes, what's your goal in life? To prepare for eternity.
I was like, the word Bible as an acronym means basic instruction before leaving earth. Have you ever heard that?
What is it?
Basic instruction before leaving earth. It's the Bible. The word Bible, it's an acronym.
Oh, yeah. I don't dwell on different times because, like you guys said, we live,
Comforting, we know that
and,
it's coming.
you know, gosh, how many centuries, right? Almost 2.5 centuries we've been
focusing on the wrong thing.
Yeah, you're focusing on the wrong thing. So, but the Olivet Discourse is always confusing. What he's saying. I originally thought when he said destroy the temple, I thought he was referring to himself as the temple. But then, 35 or 40 years later,
But then I've heard the other way.
the Romans do destroy the temple, and I don't know. But I've always sort of taken comfort in the fact that he says very clearly that we won't know when he's coming. So therefore, it's wasted energy to think about when he's coming.
No man knows.
No, that's right.
That's a tricky thing too, because it's like there are people.
Although there have been a lot that thought they knew.
Oh, right down to the hour, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
How would you know?
Both company and
Just wonder over time how many people that have died. Except Jesus, they just run out of time.
Yeah,
All of us.
yeah.
All of them. That didn't accept
All
Jesus.
non-believers, yeah.
Yeah, they just run out of time. Well, I was gonna do that, but I just never.
You were good.
I was gonna do that, but I just never, or I ought to do that. I need to do that. I just didn't do it.
Yeah, right. Well, the person on the cross next to Jesus is right. That was pretty much the last.
That's why the parable about the hiring of the workers for this harvest. The ones that came at the last hour, they earned the same
paid the
reward
same,
as
yeah.
the ones that have been there all day. It's never too late until it's too late.
And I like the one that goes with that is, why should you be mad at the person giving the money out whenever you were getting, you agreed.
You're happy with your day's wage.
Yeah, but now, it's the way life is, though. Everybody's think about it, if you're doing a job and somebody's making more or less, I mean, it's always a big deal. Instead of just, hey, I'm here, I'm getting this, that's all it's nice.
That's kind of like touching on the subject of deadly sins, jealousy, all these things that are. People expose themselves to.
All right. I was in, I think it's nice to have Jesus' words about end times, to get this teaching. I know that we get this again in Revelation, at least, somewhat of an understanding, but to hear his clear teaching on it is helpful for us, especially the part where he says, no one will know. That helps us whenever we have a lot of people trying to tell us that they know, to be able to go, yeah, no. I find comfort in that aspect. But I do think that's something interesting because it's something we know, but I don't think we wrestle with very often as believers. I was in a meeting the other day. I don't even remember which one it was, but somebody was talking and they just casually said, it gave me pause, but they casually said well, one day Jesus will come back, but hopefully not today. And then they kept talking, meaning because they have stuff going on and there's a lot of good things. And they didn't mean it that way, but I stopped and I was like, did they just say hopefully? Isn't that what we're hoping for? Isn't that? And I wonder how many of us wake up in the morning and go, I hope today's the day. How many of us actually think about it that way versus we're just so busy with our lives that we don't think about it at all. That we don't think how much do we believe that today could be the day? You said something about, I heard over here something about 2,500 years. After 2,500 years of it not happening, after 2,000 years of it not happening, it gets really easy to be well, it's probably not today. Well, it's probably not today. Okay, well, it might not be today, but let's hope it is. Let's hope it is. Please, God, today will be the day. And to mean that and to be excited about it rather than scared of it. And I just think that's so important. So I like that question. I like having that time that he talks about it, that he teaches about it, and gives us some insight of what that glorious day will end up being like. But there are some troubling aspects, like we talk about all those people that we want to be saved, but won't be with us if it did happen today. You know, if today was the day and we got our wish, which of our loved ones would we not see? And then that becomes the troubling part. So there's a lot of tear back and forth, and of course that should create the urgency to share. But that's all. I'm going into many different sermons right now, so I'll pray, and then and then we can leave. Father God, thank you for this evening. Thank you for this beautiful day. God, you are so good to us, and to just provide this space to talk about, to think about, to wrestle with, to understand, and to learn. It's just such a blessing for us. So thank you for the people in this room, for the people online. I pray that they stay safe. And Father, that I say that they come back next week, but let's hope you come back before then. And then we'll see each other in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.